Hello and welcome to Giving Ventures, a podcast to help you grow your giving and change the world for the better. Each episode, we share innovative charitable efforts leveraging private philanthropy to solve public problems. I'm your host, Peter Lipsett, Vice President at DonorsTrust. This show is a product of DonorsTrust, the oldest and largest donor-advised fund focused on helping conservative and libertarian donors of all capacities simplify, protect, and grow their giving. My colleagues and I talk with a lot of groups doing great work. This show lets us share a bit of what we learned with you, so you can discover new projects for your own philanthropy. Back in episode 51 from November 2023, I talked with 3 programs focused on engaging younger folks in and just out of college in conservative ideas and free market principles. But just because you aren't 25 anymore doesn't mean it's too late for you to immerse yourself in these ideas in a structured way. Today, we're going to talk with 3 what you might call grown-up training programs. These are all for mid-career professionals looking to deepen their knowledge of free market, political, and economic thought and theories. First up is going to be Lindsay Craig of the National Review Institute to talk about its Burke to Buckley program. Then David McIntosh joins us from the Club for Growth Foundation to talk about its Fellows program. Rounding it out, Rebecca Good from American Enterprise Institute shares the latest on AEI's Leadership Network. Whether you are a donor worried that there is no good way to train folks past college in these ideas, or you yourself are in the middle of your career and looking for just this type of program, I know you're going to enjoy hearing what these guests have to say. So let's jump in. National Review is an entity that likely needs no introduction for those listening to this podcast. Many folks probably read the magazine here and there or follow National Review writers online, but some of the folks may be less knowledgeable about the National Review Institute, the C3 educational arm that preserves and advances the legacy of William F. Buckley and the great conservative principles he espoused so eloquently. One of the several great programs that the Institute runs is the Burke to Buckley Fellowship, which specifically targets mid-career professionals for a deep dive into conservative thought. NRI's wonderful and talented president, Lindsay Craig, joins me to dive into this. Hello, Lindsay.
Hello, Peter. Thanks so much for having me.
So the Burke to Buckley program is really interesting in that it's very clear on who it is not targeting and who it is targeting. Your material clearly states this program is not intended for recent graduates or people working in the fields of public policy or politics. So who does fill the seats at these things?
Well, we're really looking for a cohort of people who likely went through their college education studying their chosen profession, right? So most higher ed programs have little time to take the history of economic thought or what is conservatism or, for that matter, what is Marxism. But they do have a lot of time for taking math if you're pre-med or if you're an accounting major, right? And so even if you're an econ major, you might not be able to take history of economic thought. And so we have found that there are people who sort of wake up and realize this. And we would love to be able to provide a program for them, just in the same way that Bill Buckley did when he was writing his columns and going and speaking to people all over the country. This is an opportunity for us to be able to carry on that part of his legacy.
And so what does that look like, the program itself? It's multi-week. It's a lot of reading, I imagine.
It's a lot of reading, exactly. So what we do is host this over 8 sessions. They are over dinner. We always have the same format of a open hollow square in all the locations. We have different discussion leaders for each topic. So we have somebody who is actually an expert in that topic to come and lead the discussion. So people who are apply for the class take the entire 8 sessions together, and then that's like the 2023 or 2024 class in a certain city. And so they go through all of the class work together, and we're hoping that that ends up not only helping to reinforce the educational aspect of this, but also the community aspect of it. And one of the things that we have found over the years, now it's 10 years going, that as people get more comfortable with each other and meeting in person, not just over Zoom, that they can learn a lot more from each other. And we think that that's an important aspect of the program.
And are most of the folks doing the teaching National Review writers or National Review Institute scholars, or does it go outside those bounds?
It goes outside those bounds. So what we try to do is have some people, the discussion leaders are sort of our regulars, right? So, Brian Anderson teaches Burke, and Catherine Lopez always teaches the last session on gratitude. And every session, or every class rather, starts with a session on Bill Buckley by Lee Edwards. But then we also try to draw on local talent. So in Dallas, Christopher Wolf teaches for us, and we try to get local, usually professors, but it could be people who are experts that are associated with other think tank groups that are in, the different cities that we have.
And so you mentioned the different cities. So one of the other interesting things about the program is that you don't make everybody come to New York. You do one in New York, but NRI is based in New York, obviously has a presence in DC, but you're not just forcing people to come to those cities. I don't even think you do DC. So you have them in Philadelphia, in Chicago, in Miami, and these different places. And so you're actually out there. I think that's really, really neat. Tell us about what that makes possible.
Well, early on when we were sort of launching the program, and I want to give a big shout out to Dan Mahoney, who is a former professor at Assumption College, and he was a board member at National Review Institute. And I came to him with this idea to say, let's create something that looks into the history of economic thought, and we can bring it to the communities that we're trying to develop all around the country. So it's the same curriculum, but in all the different areas. And the idea was to bring people together by having the exact same curriculum, but like you said, in their areas, help to develop those communities, where they are. What we also did early on in terms of choosing our areas was, as we were sort of reinvigorating National Review Institute, we had done a heat map to look at where should we really be focusing? Like, you can't be everywhere all the time, and not just with limited resources, but also limited time. So if we concentrated in certain areas, we would, with Burke to Buckley program, but also with other forums that we would have both solo hosted, and also we have a partnership program where we partner with local organizations to host National Review writers, that we would be in those areas a regular amount, and so we could help to build a community. And the Burke to Buckley program feeds into that as alumni, but also we can tell that our donor community appreciates the fact that we're also having something that is reaching out and bringing in new people to the community.
Yeah, getting in new faces, new blood, and people who are busy in their professional lives who aren't thinking about this stuff but care about it and would get it if they had the time.
Yeah,
it is a really, really valuable thing. And I know the community is really important. Does that community hang together? I mean, do you see these folks still connecting 6 months, a year, 2 years after the program's over?
Yeah, we really do. And there's a couple of aspects to that which I think are really important. One is we want the people who go through the program to do it with the understanding that we actually do want to continue to have a relationship with them, right? That it's not just totally transactional. Some people take the course and then they, go on. Most people, the vast majority, take the course and then become part of the alumni group in that area. Now that is helped along considerably by the coordinator. So the way that the program is run is that each city actually has a coordinator for a year who's an alumni. So they've been through the course, and then that's the person that interacts with our office, right? On the venue, on the menu, goes through all the applications and such. And they're the ones that are there every session with the different discussion leaders, but also can help to make sure if somebody's really having a hard time with the reading, or just like a proper teacher would do they need a little extra time, do they need some help. Also, sometimes we have very enthusiastic people, and sort of helping to moderate how much time they take during the session. So it's a really important role, both at the dinners themselves, but then also helping to keep the community together. So they have happy hours, they have recruiting events where they can bring a friend and help to expand the group of people who are applying to the program. In some of the cities, alumni have gotten together and have a book club. And in some cities, uh, people will like host a holiday party and then have all of the people, the alumni in their area come to the holiday party. I think that one of the things that's been, I think to me, very satisfying is that the group wants to be involved. And then, of course, as a nonprofit, one of the things we also want to do is be able to see how they can become part of the life of the organization as donors. And so we've been very proud about the fact that many of them join our 1955 Society in the year that they take the class. About 20% do that right that year. So there's a program fee, and then if they top off their program fee to get to the $1,000 donor level, then we consider them 1955 Society members for that year. And then many of those renew. And as I have mentioned, I'm very excited about the fact that at this last prize dinner that we had, the William F. Buckley Jr. prize dinner that we had in New York City, out of the 425 people who attended the event, almost 60 of them were Berkshire Buckley alumni. And, that's really important. And 3 of them were table sponsors. And, that's $12,000. That's a lot of money. And I think I mentioned that here to your community because I think this is what we all want. We want people who love your organization so much, right? They have some gratitude for the way that they came in, but that they see that there's so much more there and that there's a lot more ways that they can be involved and that there's a lot of other programs that they can be supporting philanthropically. And I think that I'm very proud of that aspect of the program.
Well put. That's great. So shifting away from the program for kind of the broader work of NRI, we're going into a noisy election year. I don't know if William F. Buckley's ideas of conservatism are going to be at the forefront of a lot of arguments, but NRI is there pushing some of these ideas. So what is on the horizon for NRI to keep these principles of conservatism on across the country?
Well, your opening was well stated, and I'll just leave it at that. Look, for us organizationally, we think that there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity, particularly given the fact that there is a lot of noise, right? Noise means that people haven't settled on something, and that is an opportunity for us as an organization. Last year, the boards of National Review and National Review Institute started a strategic planning process as we lead up to 2025, which is Bill Buckley's 100th birthday. So this is really a good time for us to examine sort of where we are and where we want to be. It was about 10 years ago now, a little over 10 years ago, that we revamped National Review Institute, the nonprofit, as you mentioned, that supports National Review. And we know that there's been a tremendous success. I mean, we've grown from negative to this year's budget is $8.4 million. But we know that there's a lot more that we can do, and there's a tremendous amount that National Review, the editorial publication, like the magazine and online and all the video podcasts and everything that you all see, that we can transform and really make into a 21st century media company. I mean, National Review, as you mentioned at the top, probably needs no introduction. I mean, it has an incredibly long, now almost 70 years history of being highly influential to not just the influential people at the sort of the top of the food chain, but everybody. And we think that that's really an important history of ours, and we want to make sure that we continue to build on that by expanding our audiences through the Institute programs and also at National Review.
Well, it's an important legacy to keep strong, both Buckley's legacy, but the magazine itself and these ideas. So we are delighted that National Review Institute is keeping them going. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. I just want to say one other thing. We are launching our classes in New York, Philadelphia, and Miami. I think there's a few open spots. And then in the fall, we're hoping to launch in Silicon Valley, which is basically the old San Francisco program, which closed for a few years during COVID, that we want to relaunch out there, along with Chicago and Dallas. So those are the fall programs and the spring programs. If you're interested, you need to get in touch with the one and only Lynn Gibson, who has been managing this program for us since its inception in 2014. So we owe just a tremendous amount of gratitude to Lynn and everything that she has done to make the program the success it is. So please get in touch with her.
All right. Excellent call for for more involvement. Thank you, Lindsay. One of the classic brands, the prestige brands in free market politics, is the Club for Growth. Since 1999, it has been a critical leader in identifying candidates for office that care about free trade, limited government, tax relief, and overall a strong pro-growth economic climate for America. It long operated as a political operation with 501c4 and PAC, etc., but a few years ago launched the Club for Growth Foundation, a 501c3 educational arm to go deeper into policy, establish an economic scorecard, and, as we're going to explore today, train future leaders. It does that with its Club for Growth Foundation Fellowship, equipping public and private leaders with foundational principles on core issues. And to unpack what all that means is Club for Growth President David McIntosh. David, how are you?
I'm great, Peter. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so before we dive into the fellowship, what took you so long to have a C3? What was the impetus to add it, and why now?
Actually, I'll share with you. We started interviewing lots of candidates, probably about 300 a year, and over again, I would hear from a good Republican how they were for cutting taxes. They wanted to keep government small. But really, when I asked them, why do you want to be in Congress? They would say, I just want to solve problems. And it occurred to me, having been there, that means they're going to expand government or use government to solve problems because they're in government if they're a member of Congress. And so I realized we've got to catch people before they become public servants and teach them the principle that free markets, individual liberty, individual initiatives solve problems way better than the government does, and instill that into them, train them with the best thinkers in that area. And so we thought, let's do that through an educational institution. Some of our programs, like the scorecards, could be done in a C3 because it's public education. And we also are an advocate for free market principles, limited government, and we could do research in critical areas to try to forward that. So we set up the C3. The fellowship you mentioned was our first program. We've also got the state scorecards that track how members vote in their state legislatures. And we've published probably a dozen or so critical papers that are on key issues that affect the policy based on free market principles.
And I want to touch on some of those other things this foundation is doing, but let's go into the fellowship. So what is the goal with that?
The goal there is to really train next generation of leaders and do three things. One, teach them free market principles, have them exposed to Bastiat, Milton Friedman, and along with limited government principles and how good leaders can be corrupted in Washington by the way the system works in Congress to force people to vote for bigger spending bills and what you can do to try to resist that. Teach them those principles and methods and strategies for promoting individual liberty. And then second, give them media training so they can be winsome representatives out in their communities. And these are people who are in their 30s, early 40s, a few 20-year-olds, a few 50-year-olds, but younger leaders who are already doing things in their communities. They're not candidates, so the political part of Club for Growth doesn't interact with them, but they're out there leading. And so we want them to be able to go do an interview, write op-eds, use social media to promote those ideas. But the third goal has turned out to be the most important. It's creating a network of these young leaders around the country who didn't know each other before we brought them together. Afterwards, they'll combine and compare notes of city council to city council member. There's a lot of them who are former military who talk about what they can do now to serve when they're out of the military. That was modeled on the Federalist Society, which I'm one of the founders and board members there. But the Federalist Society created this network of conservative lawyers who went out and did projects on their own. And that's been a great success. It's fun for me to see and hear reports about how the fellows got together, a small group of them, and compared notes on how do you resist movements to have DEI in the city council that they work on. or legislators that compare notes on bills that are coming up, and what are the most successful arguments to have a pro-liberty position. I'm very happy that we were able to build. It was one of those situations 4 years ago when we started. What will happen? And it's build it and they will come. It's really worked well.
How many total have gone through the program? A little over
Right
200?
now, we've got just under 200, about
Okay.
185. And I was literally talking with our executive director, Glenn, about next year's fellows, and we've got a group of 40 or 50 already that we've identified that we want to accept into the program.
And who are these folks? I mean, you mentioned the separation between the Club for Growth side and what this is doing, but I got to imagine, just given the brand, there is perhaps some bias towards people who want to be candidates or want to be local leaders, state leaders, national leaders. Is that true, or do you want to disabuse me of that?
No, it's probably the case that that's part of their desire. It's not part of our filtering process or application process. They've ranged from a lot of state legislators who want to have an education about how Congress works, but also they have different challenges at the state level where people want them to be pro-business, which is different than being pro-free market, right? Because if they're pro-business, they'll stick their thumb on the scale to help one set of businesses over another. And they're think tank leaders, businessmen, businesswomen who are interested in government and politics. And what we do is we bring them together for these monthly Zooms with a professor. Interestingly, we got started during COVID, so we couldn't do the live meetings, and we started doing Zoom programs, and that's turned out to be a great thing to continue even after COVID. We've got a couple people who are very involved in politics. One of them is a state chairman in Alabama. One of our early fellows ran for and became state chairman in Texas. But that is somewhat the exception. Most of them are people they're civic leaders in their town, their community, and in their state.
You mentioned media training earlier. One of the things I really like about your fellowship, the things I've read about it, is that you are touching on some of these things that other trainings aren't hitting. And getting conservative leaders to actually be resilient in hostile environments is a big deal. I've done media training before. It's hard. And you get people saying bad things to you, but they say bad things to you in real life and make you answer those, when did you stop beating your wife type questions. So tell us about the murder boards and the media training that you're putting these folks through.
Yeah, and this was something, again, we learned from the Federalist Society, where they trained young lawyers in the Supreme Court battles to be able to go do press interviews and explain that, these nominees are actually good people, and here's why it's important. So we hired a group, the CRC, that has done that before, told them, let's create an atmosphere where they're going to have to do a press interview. And the way we do it is they form in small groups and they all watch each other perform, and then they critique and evaluate and learn from the expert, but from each other on how to do things better and how to do their tricks of the trade, if you will, but how to turn an answer back to your issue rather than go along with the negative question that the reporter has. And we try to focus on, we have a positive message. Freedom works. Free market works. It blesses everybody in the society. Let's focus on those benefits and blessings, even when the negative question comes from the reporter. And then the murder boards are the staff here at the Club for Growth. We think of the worst, nastiest questions that we can ask them and put them on the spot just so they get used to being relaxed and comfortable coming back with an answer to that.
That's great. I mean, that's so valuable. And, getting people to be able to defend their ideas, not just behind a party label, but to have the depth to it is so important.
I got a great note the other day from one of our fellows. He's the Utah State Treasurer, Marlo Oaks. And Marlo was called to testify before the House Ways and Means Committee about the diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. And he got some pretty nasty questions from the Democrats. Later, he wrote me and said, look, the media training that you all had me do prepared me for that. It made me comfortable. I wasn't nervous, and it helped me know how to take a negative question and turn it back to my positive points. So It's great when you set up a program and you're leading the organization to have somebody write you and say, hey, thank you. It really helped me when I was doing this.
Amen. Well, briefly, before we wrap up, you mentioned the scorecard and some of the other research that you're doing with the foundation. Tell us about those, particularly that scorecard. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, so for a long time, Club for Growth did the Washington scorecard for House and Senate. That let us evaluate which people were doing a really good job for freedom and which ones weren't. We realized that's all public education, so the C3 can pick it up. But as we started the foundation, we also realized there's a missing information gap, if you will, at the state legislative effort. A lot of people, Republicans who run as conservatives, go and then they end up voting for tax increases. They vote for spending on development projects that benefit certain businesses but are costly for the taxpayer. And so we've started initially with about 10 states. I think we're up to about 30 doing state legislative scorecards. And you can imagine, Peter, people who live off a reputation as I'm a conservative Republican, and then they get a 60% on our state scorecard from the Club for Growth Foundation. They come and complain, and they'll come up with the strangest excuses. Oh, well, I had to do that. We also noticed that a lot of them skipped votes on things like a tax increase, and it would pass by voice vote, or they wouldn't be recorded as voting, so they couldn't be dinged by their constituents in their race. So we started a separate scorecard on percentage of votes that they missed. And again, I got a lot of complaints from people who are on the Republican side saying, hey, this is terrible. You know, I had to miss it because I had to go to dinner with one of my constituents. And I'm thinking, well, that's a lousy excuse for not doing your job. So it's been very helpful. A couple of years ago, we started looking to see where we've been in a state 3 or 4 years. Are the scores improving? And we've noticed there's been a shift among the Republican legislators to be much more conservative in their voting record as a result of people paying attention, their constituents being able to look at the scorecard and ask them, hey, why are you so low on a Club for Growth scorecard?
I think that's great. And, you said it at the beginning, you've reiterated a couple times, just the difference between having a certain political label and the actual ideology behind it and being able to back that up. And I think this program and everything you're doing with the C3 really helps to improve that a lot. And that's a big deal, and probably a really big deal as we go into a very actionable year for you all.
Yeah, over on the political side on the C4. And I have to say, the real blessing of the fellowship have been what the fellows themselves have been doing. 3 of the guys in the first class decided last year to run for Congress. And we knew them, we interviewed them, put them through our process. And then the C3, the foundation, doesn't do politics. So we said, good for you, do what you want to do. But the C4 part of the Club for Growth picked it up. We endorsed them, raised money, and helped them get elected. And now all 3 are members of Congress. And we've helped a lady in South Carolina, Ellen Weaver, run against a school union rep to be superintendent of education. And she's a huge pro-school choice proponent. And we helped her get elected on the political side of Club for Growth, but we knew about her because she'd been one of our fellows. And so there's a legally allowed continuity there, but we were careful to make sure the foundation doesn't do politics, doesn't engage in it, and we tell the fellows that. This doesn't mean you're going to get a Club for Growth support if you do run for office. We're here to educate you and have you and educate the public.
I think that's so great. And we need people to really understand the ideas. Those are the people we actually want running the country. And running the states and running our city councils. David McIntosh, really appreciate you sharing all this with us today.
Great to be with you, Peter.
The American Enterprise Institute is often credited as being the oldest think tank in Washington, D.C., and whether you have realized it or not, you have read the work emerging from its panoply of scholars. Given its stately position and breadth of subject areas, it is well suited for sharing some of that expertise in the form of leadership and training programs. Its leadership network does just that, exposing scores of Grasstops leaders from across the country in each of more than 21 cohorts so far that have gone through the program. Rebecca Good is the Managing Director of Outreach at AEI, overseeing a number of talent training programs, but Leadership Network is one of those, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, Rebecca, there are so many think tanks around the country and in Washington. Before we go too deep into the Leadership Network, what do you say when people ask you what makes AEI unique among all those think tanks?
Well, I love that question because I think that we are quite unique. Founded in 1938 in response to the Great Depression and some policy that was not very free enterprise oriented at the time. We started as a steady place to do enduring public policy research without taking any federal money. And we work very hard and have as a core principle that we don't have influence of our funders taking an active part in our scholarship. We don't have a C4. We don't try to fund a PAC. We do research. And we, because of that, we're able to stand kind of above or outside of the fray of a lot of the partisan norms that are in our country now. And so we're proud, very proud of our ability to contribute to the national narrative from a neutral position and really let the scholarship drive around ideas of freedom, opportunity, and enterprise.
Yeah, I know one of the things that Arthur Brooks and now Robert Doar, as presidents of the organization, are always very proud of is just the diversity amongst the leaders. They're all free market grounded, but there is a lot of diversity amongst the scholars, and they go in different directions. And I think that is one of the things that makes you really interesting. All right, so let's talk about the Leadership Network, because it's a great program. I've actually gone through it. I'm an alumni of it. So what was the original idea behind the Leadership Network, and what does that experience look like?
Well, yes, fall 17, I think. I was actually a member in fall of 16. So we were very close together in our experience as members of Leadership Network. AI works with leaders. That's just what we do, period, Leadership Network or not. And we realized in 2014 that we could do more to reach leaders outside of Washington. So we had a nice pipeline to the Hill, to the executive branch, even Supreme Court justices in some cases. But outside of Washington, we knew that there was an opportunity to reach leaders in communities and cities, educational networks, policy networks. And our patented approach to serving leaders in Washington is also relevant at the state level. So we launched the Leadership Network so that we could not only have our scholars' insights serving states and state leaders, but also to provide an opportunity for state leaders to know one another.
So what does that experience look like? You bring them to Washington, to AEI.
Yes.
What does that couple of days where they're together look like?
Well, up until now, it's been about a 2.5-day experience. This year, we're trying something new and reducing it to a day and a half with hopes that we might be able to now in our 10th year reach certain people that maybe in the past couldn't have given 2.5 days. Maybe they can give a day and a half in this sort of new season of Leadership Network. But we fully fund the whole thing. They stay in a nice hotel nearby, come to our beautiful building and experience just really a back-to-back overview and deep sessions are totally an hour and a half exposure to a variety of scholars. So we have scholars going very high level. Yuval Levin is one of our most enjoyed and requested scholars from the Leadership Network, no surprise. So he is often able to talk on the overarching themes around the constitutional pieces of AEI's commitments. But then we get very specific and with some of our upward mobility scholars or education scholars or housing scholars and get very specific on policy that seems to be working across the country or places that we see opportunity. You know, I think of back at myself as a member. I was in the education space at the time, and I was very siloed into my own place of thinking and education, which I needed to be. But it was wonderful to have an opportunity to bring my head up just a little bit and see how those educational insights were interacting with other ideas across the policy stage, not just my own silo. So that was one of the biggest gifts to me, and I think is to our participants.
I think that's right. I think the ability to see how different policies interact and what's going on in policy areas that you have no idea about. For some reason, I particularly remember a conversation about Narcan and like overdose death and opioids. And like, that is not an area I focus on at all, but yet it stuck with me because the scholars are compelling and it's interesting. So who are these people? Who are the people that are in the seats that you're bringing in, that you're giving this experience to?
So again, we work hard to find the real movers and shakers that are making things happen across the country. So oftentimes that is the person that has the figurehead title, right? Maybe it is the governor, but sometimes it's also the lieutenant governor, or sometimes it's the primary staff person who's moving things along. So in an organization, most of the time you will see that we are able to recruit C-level people in nonprofits and state legislators. We have legislators involved, and also sometimes there are the people that we just know. Gosh, if you know this person in that state, you kind of know everybody, and that's who we're trying to find. Not only for the value that brings to the conversation in the room and to the opportunity of members to get to know one another and peers, but also, frankly, in this new season of LN, it helps AEI scholars actually connect with communities and make an impact with the results of their findings. That it's one thing to write about them, but to be able to connect them with the movers and their community is a big goal in this next season, with more intentionality.
You mentioned a new season of the LN, the Leadership Network. Talk to me about that, because as I understand it, you're changing your focus a little bit about who you were trying to get in the room, or maybe not changing, but narrowing a little.
Narrowing.
Is that fair?
That's right. I think that we are still recruiting the same kind of person. We really want this to be an opportunity for true executives, true leaders, true movers and shakers to become informed and educated, not only in AEI's content, but in AEI's approach. This sort of nonpartisan, non-angry, just empirical, kind, hopefully we hope, just civil. And we just think it's good for the country for all of us to know that still exists and that's the heartbeat of our ethos of our country. But to also then consider how, not only from an educational role, which has been the primary role of the Leadership Network in the past, but also in this new chapter, my team is working hard to connect our members with our scholars at a level that we weren't pursuing as intently in years prior. So we have actually reduced the number of cohorts per year to 1 intentionally this year, because we want our staff to have time to work with our members more. We have a twice monthly newsletter that goes out to members. The Elise Newbert is the director of it, who is just, she's insanely personable and leans in deeply with all the members, and I feel like they know her, they know each other, and we want to take that to the next level to really apply their ability to connect with change on the ground with our scholar insights. So that's chapter 2 of the LN that continues with robustness that we've had before.
So I get the value to AEI because you're getting to expose your work to a lot of influential people across the country. What do you think the value is for the people in the room sitting through this?
Well, apart from the fact that you get to sit in a room with some of our preeminent scholars, that many people are just happy to try to get a book from us, from some of these scholars, there is the educational component. But beyond that, I do think it's the network part of the Leadership Network. So, if you're in the room and you've got a peer from another state board of education in the room, say you're from Michigan and the person from Nevada shows up, it's just an excellent opportunity to meet them, know them, understand that there's a shared alliance with at least some of AEI's perspective. I think we find that people are delighted to find who else is in the room. Like, oh, I didn't know someone from your organization was aligned with AEI. That's very interesting to me. And that often is forwarding careers. Of course, all of the normal professional development pieces that we would hope to offer a member. We continue to offer places to connect outside of your own cohort, and are able to field requests from those members that have been a part to provide, a scholar could come to your city and share something, or you just have a little bit more of an in, frankly, to AEI.
And, obviously, you're 10 years in and you're clearly have done some thinking about it and you aren't blowing it up. You're continuing on. So you probably, I assume, think the Leadership Network has been a success. Mm-hmm. Do you really see it getting AEI's work into all those smaller communities across the country outside of the DC echo chamber?
Strangely enough, yes. We're at 1,600 members and growing. We're in 49 states. I'm committed to getting Hawaii in this next cohort so that we can move to 50. And yes, I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. So we've hosted this last year many external facing events across the country because of our relationship with Leadership Network members. So we have scholar Ian Rowe, who's big in upward mobility and education, and one of our Leadership Network members in San Antonio brought him this last May and had a room full of 50 people here to hear Ian on school choice in Texas. Then we moved to Salt Lake City, where we had a leadership member network from the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake, who helped us bring a free forum showcasing many of our scholars, Ian and others, to Salt Lake City and their community, including state legislators. And we have gone to Indianapolis this last year because of a Leadership Network member that's very well plugged into the local think tank and business community there. And we're working a lot on workforce through our connection to her. So, I mean, it's working and it's exciting. And I think there's a lot of energy and momentum in the building for it because, upstairs is seeing how we're able to make connections between our scholar insight and our country that we love.
And hopefully it'll lead to positive changes out in the States and that those good changes in the States can actually trickle up to the national environment. That would be good.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how Leadership Network continues to evolve and grow in this next iteration of its life. Rebecca Good, thanks for sharing all this with us.
I'm glad to be here and spread the word. Our cohorts are growing.
If we are going to make the values of limited government and free enterprise pervasive, we need strong leaders who can eloquently communicate and lead with those values. These three programs at National Review Institute, Club for Growth Foundation, and American Enterprise Institute are among the best at helping to expand the base on which we can build that better future. But they are by no means the only ones. The leadership program of the Rockies does a superb job of mid-career leadership training out in Colorado and has expanded into Connecticut as well with its Charter Oak Society. And some state think tanks are experimenting with similar programs, like my friends at the Pelican Institute in Louisiana. And I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting, but they all have one thing in common. All these programs grow stronger with donor dollars. If this is an area you think is important, show it with your charitable contributions. We at DonorsTrust are happy to talk with you about leveraged ways to use your philanthropic capital to make progress in this arena, or in whatever interest area drives you. Thank you for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe in your podcast player of choice, which, by the way, could also be YouTube, where you can find all our episodes. We do not have the video of me and the guests talking, but it is a great way to listen in the background while you work. Watch for more great episodes coming up in the next few weeks. Until then, thank you for being a giver. Let's talk more soon.